Hi, Krista, and lovely to have a chat with you. We've been talking for a little while, but be nice just to record this conversation. And yeah, maybe you can just explain how we've met and how things have been developing for you recently.
Yeah, so my husband actually had been he was reading The Greatest Secret,
Mhm.
and he saw your name in there, and he started, watching your videos. And he was bugging me for a while. I want to say it was about 2, 3 months ago. He was saying, "You got to check out this guy. I mean, you're really, really gonna love this." And so I did end up listening to some of your videos. I started off with what you had posted on Conscious TV, and then that led me to a podcast I think that you did with a young lady, much like myself, and the interviews that you conduct with other people. And so I intuitively just, decided one day, I was like, well, if these other people are talking to him, I would love to chat with him as well. And so I do a podcast. It's called the Woo Woo Wonder Hour, with a friend. And it is a podcast that talks about everything from alternative health to everything metaphysical. It's about the expansion of consciousness. And so I reached out to you, David, and you agreed to do an interview with me. And in that email, I told you that, I was on the brink of understanding something that was so profound that I couldn't articulate into words.
Mhm.
And over the course of, I think it was about a month, I lost my father. He passed during that time about 3 weeks ago, and there was some sort of energetic paradigm shift that happened during that time, that led me to know my true nature, with your input. And so I reached out to you again and I said, would you be interested in recording on my own self realization? And so here we are. And then we've had this amazing chat. And so a little bit about my background is, I would from a young age, I would say that I've always been a seeker. My childhood, uh, I can remember being very connected to nature and animals and being very joyful and happy. And then, at a certain point, I want to say probably about 8 or 9 years old, I started to interact more with other young human beings.
Mhm.
And, I, I had a difficult time. I was bullied for being overweight. And, I started to subscribe to the belief that I cared very deeply about what other people thought of me.
Mhm.
And that kind of set me into this tone for a long period of my life where, I was always seeking something to fill a void in my life, whether I was numbing myself with alcohol, or I was, trying to be something or wear, somebody else's clothes to be accepted. I felt like, I don't know, I felt like I was just like an alien just plopped down and onto this planet, and nobody understood me.
Yeah. That's very
And that I
common.
was just doing the best I could.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned that things started moving for you spiritually about 15 years ago.
Yes. So I had reached a point, of ultimate despair, kind of like what Eckhart Tolle talks about with his moment where he was, thinking, like he wanted to die.
Mm.
And I was at that point, and somehow I don't remember exactly how, but I turned to spirituality, which had never been presented to me as a child. Although I can look back at my early childhood and see how I was, deeply spiritual, especially, with the connection to nature. But over that time, that period of time from young childhood into an adult, I had lost that connection to who I truly was, or, that soul level connection.
Yes.
So I turned to spirituality, and I started meditating. And meditation helped me tremendously, because I was able to slowly but surely over time, just become a little bit more calmer. And meditation led to, exploring, more of the mystical side of spirituality, which, was energy healing and, working with your chakras and yoga and, all these different modalities that are available in the spiritual community. And so, during that period of time, I did a lot of spiritual work. And you and I talked about this, David, where I recognized that I had a big, as Eckhart Tolle would say, big pain body. And I was heavily identified with this pain body and the multiple egos that I had. And I was deeply inauthentic. I don't think that at that point I really knew who I was. And I guess that was a very good place to be in. And so I went on this journey of using these different spiritual modalities to help heal myself. And so I did, raise my frequency high enough to have these amazing experiences, just a lot of amazing mystical experiences. And I really thought I knew who I was. I thought that I am a light worker, I'm an empath, I'm a healer, and I'm here to expand the light of consciousness. And I, up until very recently, this was my mantra, right? And but at the same time, I'm in this heavily spiritual world. I am also in corporate America. And so I wore two different hats, or I played two different roles where I was the spiritual lady, and then I was also the corporate America, I know what I'm doing kind of lady, right? And so when I started to, when my dad passed, and after I had started to really engage myself in the content that you're offering, there was this energetic shift that happened around my dad's passing, where I just realized that awareness is aware of itself. And, I was more aware of the divine being, and I stepped into that divine being nature. And like I told you before, I have, over the past 3 weeks since my dad has passed, I have been in this state of neutrality. And, before, I was always thinking that I needed to do something, that, I was always searching very deeply for purpose in everything that I did, and healing in everything that I did. And now here I am. And as I told you before, I don't feel the need to do anything.
It's an amazing liberation, really. And it's quite a classical one in a way. Deep loss is an opportunity just to revert to our infinite nature, because while there seems to be something that we can do, then we tend to be involved in practices and things, but there's a kind of helplessness in one respect, and that can be just total liberation. So it's quite interesting, though, because the the email you sent me initially, you mentioned that there was a feeling that there was quite a thin veil in one respect, that you knew that you were just really close, and then it's presented itself in this way. But it's in one way it's very dramatic, but in another way it's really simple, because it's the content that we're kind of distracted by that keeps the whole of the relative game spinning. But then when there's an experience which comes along which puts an end to that, then you just see the simplicity of what you've always been. And it's lovely the way you just say awareness is aware of itself. It's just so simple.
Yeah. And that's what it, I think that a lot of us in the spiritual community are looking for some sort of magnitude of experience to self-realize, right? And to have something so profound in such a simple way was surprising to me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think that's a stage. I think most people go through that stage, because the sort of classic sequence is that, well, most people, we have in the early part of our life, I think you had a very happy childhood. So you mentioned that your early childhood was just really happy and harmonious. So that's the initial stage. And then moving into the human realm and the sort of competition and, creating the human character and functioning through that sheath is something which leads us into suffering generally. And then from there, we're looking for solutions in a spiritual sense. But because everything has been to do with content up until then, we're looking for solutions in terms of the content. So it tends to be, things like meditation and spiritual practices and, things to supplement our experience and give us more subtlety of experience. So the mind assumes that there's an enhancement which is going to lead to realization. But actually, what you saw is that it's when there's a simple seeing that, rather than awareness being aware of the content of experience, it just becomes aware of itself. And that's the simplicity of realization. And that it's the way you describe it, with utter simplicity, that's really lovely.
Yes. And like we spoke before, since this realization, I can see how I step into these various roles in my life, right? And, in these roles, I will, engage in certain emotions. But at the same time, there is this, to use your terminology, effortless awareness of each moment that I am in that role, whether I want to engage or not. Yes. In a certain experience.
Yeah. That's great. Well, it's great that it's become conscious, because the seeking of experiences, when we think we're looking for realization through experience, it tends to be quite compulsive in a way. But when there's the simplicity of seeing that you're just resting as effortless awareness, effortless being, then the motivation into experience is much more subtle. And for you, it's quite interesting, because you were saying you feel as though there's nothing that you need to do. And I think that that's the ultimate integration, really, just to get to that point. But then gradually you'll find that there will be motivation into activity, but it'll come intuitively rather than from the mind. And it'd be interesting to see where that goes, really.
Yeah, I can think of many scenarios in my life where there have been, there's been mental activity to try to, force something to happen or to will something to happen.
Yeah.
And to be in that space now where, and I think that I'm just having a hard time to explain it to my friends, to my family, to anyone.
Yeah.
It's like, this person that once was very driven to do something or to do spiritual work, or to be a healer or whatever. I have no drive for any of that. It feels liberating at the same time to feel like, whatever the universe presents is what is, it should be
Yes.
the experience at this time.
Yes. Well, you're really lucky that your husband also is on the same page with you. So that's great for both of you, for your relationship and for your children, because you can consciously guide your children in a way where you're maintaining the ability for them to know their true nature, rather than to become fully immersed in the world, because that's an option these days.
Yeah, it's funny because our children, we do speak a lot about spiritual topics to our children, and they know what their ego is, and and everybody gets offended if we say, "Oh, that's your ego."
That's great. Yeah.
He My husband is, I feel like he is probably very close to his own self-realization as well. But he has, he struggles with the mental realm and the emotional realm, and getting in past those topics. But in reality, everything very deeply profound in my spiritual development, or my journey, or whatever you want to call it, he has brought to me. So
Wow, that's
I'm very
amazing.
thankful for that. He
That's
brought you
great.
to me.
That's great. And well, it is, in a way, it's more challenging for men, because I think the female nervous system is more in alignment with the body of wisdom and with intuition. And I think that for whatever reason, especially the way men are educated to serve the system in a conventional way, mind predominance is something which is it's built in, in a more complex way to the way men function. So it's it can seem like an obstacle, but actually it isn't, because it isn't. None of that belongs to us anyway. So it doesn't really matter if there can be awareness of a subtle female nervous system, and there can be awareness of a more predominant male system, but actually the awareness that's aware of them is the same and is unchanging. So it doesn't really matter what the content is.
Yep. And that makes sense. And I think that for him, and for males, he never really was engaged in all of what I will call the woo-woo or the metaphysical aspect of spirituality. He was never into crystals. He was never big into energy healing, or a lot of those things that are in the dualistic realm. He was always more interested in the core truth, which I think is profoundly simple, and it's the way to go, really.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, you're saying about your dad too, that your dad lived in a very simple way, and because in the conversation we had earlier, we were talking about integration, and how integration is most effective when we're actually prioritizing our own sense of well-being, rather than continuing to try to create on a material level. And you mentioned that was what your dad actually told you, that he said to you that just prioritizing that sense of joy and delight in your daily experience is the most important thing. So some people just know this already. Realization is sometimes put forward as though it's an exceptional level of knowing, but I think there are lots of guys, probably your dad included, where they're already there. It's just that they don't conceptualize about it, really.
Yeah, that's just the way that he was. And like I told you, it was actually before he passed, a short period before he suddenly passed, that he told me that, just have fun in every moment, have joy.
Yeah.
Whatever life whatever life presents to you, just have fun with it.
Mm.
Because, I think that he could read in my energy that, I've always been more serious
Mm.
and, very identified with certain things.
Mm.
So I think that he just innately knew that I needed to hear that.
Mm. Mm. That's great. Yeah. So how do you feel things are going for you over, just in recent weeks, really, because there's been a kind of unwinding in a way, and just, I guess there's just an alignment with functioning from effortless awareness, and that's something which in one way it's totally familiar, but in another way it's new because the foundation of experience is different. So functioning from your infinite nature rather than from a sense of individuality is it's a new space in one respect.
Yes. I feel like over the past couple of weeks, I have felt more at ease than I ever have in my entire life.
Mm.
There's just an ease with whatever I do or whatever I experience.
Mm.
And I also feel a great deal of peace because, before I was always so identified with the various roles that I was playing. But you are right, there has been an unwinding because I've had so many, through my spiritual experiences, I've had so many deeply, mystical and spiritual experiences over the course of my life, that realizing that those are part of the dualistic realm, and that, I am the infinite being, resting in the infinite being, there has been an unwinding of that,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds great. And have you noticed any differences in your relationship with your children?
Yes. I would say that I am definitely more present with them and more joyful. And, there's just not that heaviness in my energy anymore. And, you and I talked about this before. I considered myself a very aware person, right? Through my spiritual work that I've done with myself. But now awareness, now that awareness is aware of itself, I can feel the emotions and the energetic, the emotions or the mental activity in my physical body.
Yes.
And once I feel those things come into my physical body, I am not identifying with them. It's almost as if they just effortlessly release, or it just kind of, everything is more flowing than ever before. And before, I told you that, I was a big believer, and I've identified as an energetic healer, that, oh, my heart chakra is blocked, I'm gonna, do this deep meditation and listen to this 528 hertz frequency, and I'm gonna put this green rock on my chest, and I'm gonna release this block,
Yes.
and even that, there's no need for any of that. There's just an innate knowing that there's no need for it. There's no need for the meditation. There's no need for any of it.
It's all entertainment ultimately, isn't it, really?
But I've been so identified with this for so many years that it's an unwinding. And I do enjoy that role of Krista. So, I do engage in that role still with my new, with my integration, where I step into that role. But there is just a deep awareness around all of it.
Well, it shows a lot of humility, actually, because to be developing those abilities for so long, and then just to see them in a new light, and then to be able to relinquish identification with them, that's a real achievement, in such a short time.
Yeah, a deep
Right.
unwinding.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see the way there's a transition from from healing in the ways that you mentioned, like with Reiki and energetic healing, into assisting people with realization, because that's definitely something that'll come forward for you. So yeah, it'd be nice to see how that works, really.
At this point, David, I don't even know how to articulate any of this. It's
No, it's pretty new, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it's very new, and we talked about this before. You understand, exactly what I'm feeling and what it is, but to articulate this to another person or my friends, my family, it's very difficult to do, because the person that I was once identified with and all the beliefs that I had, those have all shattered away, realizing that that's part of the dualistic realm.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah, there has to be a transition, doesn't there? Because we can lose credibility otherwise, because people will say, well, hang on, this isn't very consistent here.
yeah, no.
But yeah, it'll just work. I think you've just identified the best solution, which is just to do nothing for a little while, and then the ability to articulate that'll just come really easily.
Yes. But it's a profound gift, to be able to realize that, you are the divine being, and that, you play these different roles, and you can choose what you subscribe to and what you don't.
Yes.
And you know like you had said before, you can access, you can subscribe more to those experiences of love and compassion and unity,
Yeah.
consciously, through the divine being.
Yes.
And if you and then you can also see those other experiences, like grief or deep sadness or anger. And if you want to subscribe to those, you can, but there is energetic consequence of that.
Yes. That's great articulation.
And we were talking about that earlier as well. I can see throughout my whole life, I have subscribed to the spectrum of all different types of things. And if you do engage in what you want to call those lower level frequencies in the dualistic realm, your physical, your emotional, and your mental body suffer because of it, energetically.
Yes.
And I remember up until a few weeks ago, feeling like a bus ran over me at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about the way things have changed for you in terms of your working life, because with realization, the impact, because you are hypersensitive, the ability to feel energy fields of those around you at work is something which, where there's identification with individuality, then they seem to be impacting us more. Whereas the sensitivity remains, but actually the ability to witness those things rather than for there to be any energetic consequences, that's a real, great indicator of realization.
Yes. So I had told you that, before, I've always been a big meditator for the past 15 years.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I'll even meditate 2 hours a day in order to prepare myself in order to step into the role of corporate America, Krista.
Yes.
Or even healer, Krista. That also took a lot of energy as well.
Yes.
And so now, with this realization, I do not find the need to, there's not even a need to meditate. because I am in a constant state of neutrality.
Yeah.
Even after the passing of my father, I will feel energetic waves of emotions come in, but they just pass through.
Yes.
And they don't leave that residue, that energetic residue.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. The way you're processing those things. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And we also talked about how, I've also played the role of the empath, and a lot of people in the spiritual community will talk about being an empath, that you are, you're affected by people and your environment and situations, and that you
Yes.
take on that energy. But when you step into the role, or when you are the infinite being and you self-realize, keeping in that state of neutrality, it really, it takes away the empath. The empath doesn't exist.
Yes. Yeah, you can step into the role of the empath, but you're not energetically compromised by any of that. Yeah.
And so I'm interested to see how this, as time goes by, how that develops with the empath, because my whole life I've been so energetically sensitive.
Yes.
I don't think I've told you this, but like when I close my eyes, I see colors. And like, I guess they're aura colors. I don't know what they are, but I've always seen colors for different people.
Yes.
And I still see those, but I am not, I don't put any meaning to them like I used to.
Yes.
Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And also, because you have your podcast, I think it'll be a great way to chronicle the way things evolve for you, because I think lots of people will be really interested to see how integration takes place, and for you to be able to describe that process and the transition from the spiritual modalities into functioning exclusively from your infinite nature. So that, I'll be interested in hearing some of those myself.
Yeah, because a lot of what we talk about is in the dualistic realm.
Yeah.
So
yes.
So it's well, not the dualistic realm, but most notably, I guess, in the etheric realm.
Yes.
We talk about spirits and angels and being an empath and all these, and crystals and all these different things. And I'm at a point where I just don't know. It's so my paradigm has shifted so much that I am interested to see how it will go as well, David.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll still love, I still love my crystals and things like that. But the meaning, the beliefs and the meaning that were assigned to these things, they just no longer exist. Does that make any sense?
It does, yeah. Well, you're giving everything the meaning you wish to give to it, which is what you can do as the sovereign infinite being. So
yes,
that's great.
And it kind of reminds me of, in A Course of Miracles, where they have those different lessons that you go through each day. And it says, you kind of look at the room and you say, I have given, I don't know exactly the word, but like, I have given all the meaning
yes.
of the, what I'm saying?
What
lesson I'm
something
talking
like
about?
everything I see only has the meaning I give to it.
Exactly.
Like that, yeah.
Yes. So I can, I read that a very long time ago, bits and pieces of it, and I never got it. But that aspect of it, comes to mind when we're talking about what we're discussing here.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, it's an amazing integration, really, because, the challenge that we all face, in the human realm of loss is something which we're conditioned into pain, and we're conditioned into things like grief. But for you to be liberated from that in such a short space of time is amazing. That's
Yes. And it's not just me. My mother was also she's been liberated from it a good bit as well.
fantastic. Have you assisted her with that?
Yes.
Great.
So we didn't speak about this, but her and I were present when my father passed. It was a very sudden passing. We were not anticipating it. But there was, when the passing occurred, there was this deep understanding from her, and this deep, the best way that I can explain it, it was almost like a miracle, because this woman had held on to so many negative experiences, let's say, and she was very fixated on these negative aspects of it. And it's almost like when he passed, she realized that it's all love, that everything, all those things that she focused on, she misconstrued them, and that there was always that base of love. And my mother has become a completely different person since his passing. And like me, she's experiencing a lot of peace, but she does have more grief, more waves of emotion that comes in. But I can see her release. They come in and then they flow out.
Fantastic.
So to see her change so dramatically, and just that entire experience of him passing, I mean, it happened moments before his he left the physical body. This shift, this energetic shift at a cellular level for both of us.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's great that your mum has seen. Really, it sounds as though she's seen that there were those invitations which had been delivered through her life, in terms of seeing maybe her relationship with her husband and to do with experiences, and believed those invitations to be true. And really, they were being delivered as invitations, and they were actually nothing to do with your dad and nothing to do with the situation. And so it's as though that whole system has just collapsed now. And then, as you mentioned, all that's left is just love.
Yes. And when she speaks of my father, or she speaks of anything, there is this undertone of love and peace that I've never seen in my own mother. So it's very interesting that we have both made a very huge shift.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure that everyone in your midst, your husband, your mom, your children, and all your friends, you're going to be able to liberate them all.
I hope so. I mean, to be able to know this simple and profound truth is just, it's life-changing. There's no words to describe this feeling. And so I'm excited to see, how things transpire over the next year, 5 years, in this learning to integrate this effortless being.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really the solution, just the simplicity of it. It's the enjoyment. It's not really anticipation. It's just being kind of inquisitive as to seeing how things just present themselves, and not feeling as though you need to take action or that you need to facilitate anything, but just that exactly what's required will be presented to you.
Yes. And like you said before, you can learn to operate not in the mental or emotional realms, but operate from the body of wisdom and bliss, and come from a place of inspiration, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
When that inspiration comes, you can engage in that, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. That's great. It's amazing the way it's happened so quickly for you, Krista. It's yeah, it's delightful to see as well.
Well, I thank my husband for for putting me in touch with you, and watching all these videos of these the wonderful people that have interviewed you have that was also a huge help for me, because there are bits and pieces of the story that you can identify with
Yes.
anyone.
Yes.
Like you said, my story's a classic story, right?
Mm.
You start off as the infinite being, and at some point, you lose touch with that infinite being, and you start to I guess you never lose touch. The infinite being is always there, but then you start to identify with the role of
Yes.
Krista.
Yes.
And then you build multiple roles sometimes, like I did,
Yeah.
and to realize that those are roles, and to rest in your infinite being it's huge. It's my whole world is shook up, but in a good way.
Yeah. You return to the home that you never left.
Exactly. And the spirituality has it's served me so well over these last years, and I know that it serves a lot of people in raising their vibrations and their frequencies, and accessing those more positive frequencies like love and unity, for example.
Yes.
But to know the root truth of it all is the ultimate liberation.
Definitely. Yeah. But then you discover you've been on a training course, really, because all the things that you've learned over the past 15 years and more, you can relate to everyone that comes and has a conversation with you, because you're familiar with those different modalities. So it's much easier to be able to make sense of where people are, when you have that breadth of experience. So that's really helpful. You've been on like a postgraduate training course without even realizing.
Yeah. Well, what they talk about in spirituality is that this is a school, right? And that there's all these levels of consciousness, and that you want to go from this level down here with fear, and then you want to work all the way up to love and unity and all those things. But to realize that there is no there are no levels of consciousness is just like mind blowing.
Yeah.
And I think I told you this. I think that was one of the there were a few things that you talked about that were very very important for my realization, and that was one of them. That the levels of there are no levels of consciousness. And just knowing that and internalizing that, it shifted a lot of things energetically for me.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was somewhere on that chart or graph or whatever, right? And I was working my way up to the top.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
And then another thing that was very important was that there's a sense of equality, and that self-realization is obtainable for all of us.
Yes.
And I had shared with you that in a lot of spiritual teachings as well, they make you feel like self-realization, or I don't really like the term enlightenment, but it's basically the same thing. They make you feel like it's unobtainable.
Yes.
That you're going to have to reincarnate on this planet.
Yes.
Billion times.
Yeah.
And learn your lessons, and then you're going to get more karma, because you're going to take on the karma of the collective as well. And so to be able to realize that it's obtainable and it already exists inside of you
Yes.
was a really big point.
Yeah.
For me.
Fantastic. And it's amazing the way people come forward, you know, the way you and I have met effortlessly, and the people on my channel, you know, there's been no kind of structuring. It's all just random in the way it emerges. But it's the thing I love is that it kind of gives everyone an insight into the possibility of realization, and, you know, that it's unique for everyone, but also that it's attainable. And it's amazing the way all of that is structured by the infinite being. We have no part in that really, but it's fantastic that you've added your experience to that. That's so nice.
Yes. Because, you know, if you subscribe to the belief that we're here in this school, and that, you know, you come to this planet and have all of this karma, and, you know, and that, you know, you can never really reach that aspect of it, you know, it's just beyond your reach, then that in itself, that belief limits you.
Exactly.
Right. And it keeps you in the dualistic realm.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're consenting to it. And as the infinite being, because we're sovereign, if we consent to it, then that's our experience.
Yes.
So yeah, that's great. You've seen that.
And, you know, and even just to expand on that a little bit more, you know, you see like some spiritual teachers that are like the guru, and that, you know, you need to treat the guru in a specific way, and that they're the enlightened being, and that being in their presence is, you know, raising your vibration so that you can transmit something in your pineal gland, or, you know.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm pretty deep into it, but you know, it's just a gift. And that's a big one. It's a gift to know that you already are it. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to be anything. You are already it. Wonderful. Awareness is aware of itself.
Amazing. Well, that's fantastic, Krista. Thanks so much. It's been, it's amazing that you were having reservations about articulating this. I think you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you. You'll have to check in with me after some time has passed, but
yeah, definitely.
I am so grateful for you, David, and, you know, my husband is as well, as you are teaching him too. And I'm excited to see, you know, where this journey of resting in effortless being takes me.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Well, lovely to meet you. And thanks so much for recording this conversation.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.